Now that you understand how to use a lot of these different types of tools or indicators, this is an extremely important lesson. Sometimes it's this type of lesson that separates those who are going to succeed from those who might not succeed as much. And really what you want to be looking at is how do we combine the tools for better returns, right? Which combinations or how many should we be using is really the question we're going to ask here in this lesson for you to take away and think about how you want to build up your strategy as far as being an investor and a trader. So first off, think about using more than one tool instead of depending on one tool. Using one tool is better than no tools, right? It's better than guessing, or I like the color of their logo. One of the ways people invest. Using one tool is better than no tools for sure. A sweet spot seems to be when you start using at least two tools. Two tools is better than one. You really, what we're thinking about here is having like a primary tool that you really use all the time to kind of identify, buy, and sell opportunities, and then using another one to kind of confirm that. So they kind of match up that way. And we'll get in a little more detail on that in the next couple of lessons here. But that's the idea, is I'm using one really to determine things as a primary, and then I use another one for confirmation. I could go up to 3 to 4, maybe that's okay too. It's even more confirmation around that. Those we see there's a little bit of element of diminishing returns, but you need to know more indicators very well inside and out. But you can go 3 to 4. But you start using 5 or more, that's a little too unwieldy. You can be aware of all the stuff, like we've learned a lot of different tools in the course, and so you can be aware, like, oh, I see something, maybe I should look closer at it, but it wouldn't be necessarily a primary tool for you. And should you use all the tools and all the other tools in the wider indicator universe out there? Well, no, that's just crazy talk. So let's talk a little bit more about that as far as how many tools to use. One reason you want to combine these tools for better returns, and it's really a core concept of technical trading actually, is the primary on its own, while better than none, can be wrong. As we know, they can have false signals. You have noise out there, you have whipsaws, you have all sorts of things. And so nothing's foolproof, so it can be wrong. And so a real good way to do it is having a primary indicator that you primarily use, and then having a confirming secondary indicator in using them together to confirm that primary one is much less likely for a false signal. You're not getting a false signal on one, you'd have to be getting a false signal on two, for it to be kind of not as strong an indicator. If you add a third or fourth indicator, that starts to add some complexity and possibly some diminishing returns. Not impossible, you can do it. I would say starting off, if you're newer to this, certainly start with 1 and 2, use a primary and a secondary. But if you start adding some of the simpler third or fourth indicators, you can do that, but there might be some diminishing returns. And the reason for that is you start now, maybe using various inputs or time frames, and that can always be tricky as far as different time frames that work better with different types of indicators. There's various trading rules that you establish, as far as when you're buying, when you're selling, and adding more complexity to it would be, adding a third and fourth indicator. It's hard to become really rock solid and really knowledgeable with so many tools, trying to use them all the time, every day, or every time you're trading. Great to be aware of it, very important to be aware of it. There's unexpected opportunities that come up with, so you might see something rare like an island reversal, as we learned in our gap trading section here, but you're not going to be necessarily using that as a primary indicator, for example. If you are, that's great, just find a secondary one, but to confirm it. But it's hard to be an expert when you have too many tools, so you don't have to worry about that. And you can experiment with the different tools you're learning in this course, with your paper trading or back testing, and see how you want to use that. And then indicators can be in conflict. A lot of times they don't confirm each other, but they might be actually opposite, and that can happen. So that can confuse this thing too. And as you add more indicators, that's more likely. So I would say a primary and a secondary is really core. A third is fine. A third can be okay, especially if you're feeling real comfortable with all three. That's great. Fourth, you're really going to be extra level. That's okay. But you understand you might be experiencing some diminishing returns if you start seeing your performance go down as you start adding an indicator. Then you might want to back off and go to 1 or 2 or possibly 3. And then 5 or more, no, that's really not advised. I mean, again, being aware is very important, and being aware of things like different chart patterns or candlestick patterns or whatever it is. Being aware is good, but using it as your really primary way of trading and trying to, every day is like a whole new day as far as using the indicators, that's not really advised, and that's not going to help you to be successful. And you might be thinking, well, is there one dominant strategy? Is there one, like, tell me, should I use this with this candlestick, with this moving crossover, price crossover of a moving average, or something like that? Is there one dominant strategy? No. If there was, then everybody would be using it. So there is no dominant strategy. Plus, this would be a real short course. It'd be like 3 minutes. Just use this. Right? So there's no one dominant strategy. Now, there are some classic examples that are more proven. For sure, that is true. In some ways that they work better together, and we have upcoming lessons on that. It's going to look at these classic examples, but also how to kind of put it together too. When, let's say, if we're creating your own type of, kind of combining of the tools. And I think that's a good way to do it, actually. You can start with some classic ones, or you can look at classic combinations, but then think about what you learn in the course and really kind of gravitate and create your own. What lessons really, sung out to you? What really, did you really grasp quickly or feel real comfortable with? That's a good indication that might be a good indicator for you. Remember, all the indicators are good. There's no bad indicators, just some might be better than others in different situations, and as we'll learn later lessons, that some are better as far as being complementary to one another. So that's coming up. What are you comfortable with? What are you excited about? What you might have an indicator like, I love this, I want to use this every day, and then it makes sense to you. If you're using an indicator because you feel forced to use it because somebody on YouTube or somebody on a forum said you got to do it this way, and it doesn't really make sense to you, or you don't really buy into it as much, then skip over it. Pick a different indicator. Everybody has their favorites, and more importantly, things that work well for them. And that's how you can really test to see what's working well for you. Where we talked in the earlier lesson about back testing and paper trading. Just a reminder around that, back testing is for free. Most platforms offer that for free. Almost all of them do, or they have some sort of that. If they don't, you might want to look at a different platform, I suppose. But where you can back test things, where you can look at the indicators that are of interest to you, pick a primary and a secondary, maybe a third or fourth, and then you can back test that over historical data, real historical data, to see how that would have worked out. And you can start seeing if it's working for you as far as the actual performance by back testing it over historical data, real historical data. And then paper trading is basically trading with fake money, right? You're not investing your own money. So you're paper trading with this kind of fake account and fake money that you can set up with. It's called a paper trading account. So there's another way for you to try out, different indicators and what's working for you, what you feel comfortable with. Once you start really looking at charts and applying these indicators, you're going to see some that are going to just really make sense and really, you're going to gravitate to. So use paper trading to kind of practice with that as well. So figure out and create your own is good. I'll show you some classic combinations upcoming, but really think about back testing and paper trading can be very, very powerful as far as, doing what you love to do. Remember, in the end of the day, you've got to be two things. You've got to be successful as far as with your trading. You want to be successful with your trading. That's most important, or very important. If you're not successful, then that's going to cost you a lot of money. And so you want to be successful, but you want to enjoy what you're doing too. Don't feel forced into something. You want to have it make sense, that you enjoy it, that you're having success, and having that great attitude towards your trading, and that you're having financial success with it too. And that's the real whole key to this too as well, as opposed to, let's say, finding a magic indicator or being forced down a certain path. So combining indicators, very important. Certainly have a primary, and very good to have a secondary. 3 or 4 okay too. Get more than that, that might be be aware, but that might be a little bit more of a caution sign.